want to just, I hope that you can be inspired a little bit to realize the value of what you can do by reaching someone else. Now, remember Phillip and Nathaniel in the Bible? You know, what did Phillip tell Nathaniel? Does anybody remember that story? This was one of the earliest times we have on record when somebody reached out like that. And he said, come and see, didn't he? He said, we found, how does that scripture go? Somebody quote it for me. We have found him of whom Moses and the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? I don't see that happening. And Philip saith unto him, come and see. And so, this morning I wanted to tell you about a few times among us where that has happened. And it's happened a lot of times. How many of you know Brother Bill Edwards? Anybody here know Brother Bill Edwards? I think probably most of us do, don't we? You know, he was 22 years old. He was going to college, and so was Brother Craig Dixon. Now, Bill Edwards wasn't raised going to church, so he didn't know much about anything. But Craig did, and they would study. They would study together for their school studies. And so Brother Craig invited him to come home with him one weekend. So he came home, and you know, ironically, they went to church. I don't know if they did the first week, and I'm sure they did. But he said about the fourth time that they went home together, they were staying up way into the night and talking. And Brother Craig just simply said, so what's keeping you from being saved? And he said, nothing. And Craig was like, well, let's get saved. So they went in and woke up Brother Craig's dad, Brother Stanley Dixon, and they had prayer. And Brother Edwards, Brother Bill said, the rest is history. Now, they were 20 years old, I guess, not 22. And so that's how that happened. Now, Craig was never, he said Craig wasn't a preacher. His dad was, but he wasn't. And he didn't preach to him either. He just said, let's go to church. Why don't you come home with me? And you know, a lot of times it happens that way. And so, is that the end of the story? I think about, does anybody know Braden or Haley? Or Lauren? Does anybody know them? They're just downstream, aren't they? So here, Craig just brought somebody to church. And he just simply posed the question, what's keeping you from getting saved? Oh, nothing. You know, people really many times want things to be right between them and God. But they need somebody to just help them get there. You know, I had an uncle, Jim Gibson was his name. He had been an alcoholic for something like 50 years. He was a bad dad. He was a bad husband. He was not a good man. I'm not going to say he's the worst that ever lived, but he was an alcoholic, and his whole life was like that. But there was a young man, my brother, Dan. Does anybody know Dan Gellenbeck? Dan and Angela? Well, Dan said, I'm going to start calling Uncle Jim, calling him. So he would call him every week or every month. I can't remember how it started. And Uncle Jim let him know, I don't want to hear one word about religion. He let Dan know. Well, that was okay. He just kept talking to him. And you know, pretty soon, that friendship like that really bloomed. And Uncle Jim started calling him back. And they would call each other. One would call one Sunday and one the next. And you know, after a while, Uncle Jim started thinking about things. And then he ended up getting cancer. You know, people have needs. And the Lord kind of sets those things up, doesn't He? The Lord's trying to get people saved. And you know, after a while, the end of that story is Uncle Jim got saved. And it was an awesome thing. Because here was a man that spent his whole life out in sin, deep sin, doing ungodly things. But God saved him just by somebody making a phone call once a week and befriending him. So I just want to encourage you kids this morning. This is the opening of the retreat, the school assembly this year. And our subject is each one reach one. I want to encourage you kids today. Listen, your little testimony, your friendship, just your friendship can mean all the difference. And so I'm going to tell on Sister Tammy and Brother Randy here a little bit too. I asked her about it. You know, they're another one that came from somewhere else. And, you know, someone befriended them. And she kind of told me her testimony. I'm trying to make this fast because I only have so many minutes here. And I'm afraid I've about used them up already. But she said they went to Couch High School. And she knew Randy, but she didn't really like him because he had a loud car and he listened to loud music and he had long hair. And, you know, that's kind of the way we are before we get saved, isn't it? So when you look out there to see people that might be a likely candidate, they might have long hair and they might listen to loud music. I remember when I listened to stuff, the first time Rosie heard me listen to it, she was like, "Phillip, I can't believe you listen to that stuff." And you know, but those I Done Somebody Wrong song, I love those songs for some reason. All kinds of stuff like that. And you know, when I first came around, I had big old bell bottoms on. I didn't look like the saints, really. But you know what? Somebody started inviting us to church. And in fact, we began to go to the school there. Well, I didn't. I went to public school. Can you hear me still? I went to public school, and so I finished out because I was in my senior year when we started coming around the saints. But you know what? The Christian school there in Guthrie, the Path of Life School, opened up and took my sister and two sisters and a brother of mine and began to work with them. And so we went to school functions and things like that. We would never think of going to the Faith and Victory People's Church. No way we would ever do that. But you know what? God works in all of these things. And after a while, we began to kind of come around. I began to seek the Lord. I wanted something more than what I had. I saw something I didn't have. And you know what? I wanted it as bad as people who did. Maybe worse. And you know, the Lord He met me just like He would meet anybody else. And He poured out His Spirit, and it so changed my life. And so, you know, there's a bunch of us downstream now of that. Does anybody know Matt or Mike or their children or Kelsey or Robert or Caleb? Dan Gellenbeck's here, and I think his son Joseph, I don't know if he's here right now, but he's come along, and his children. You see what one person or two, just bringing them around. No, nobody really preached to me. We just came around. But I'll finish up this other story here as quickly as I can. Folks, I want to tell you, young kids, young folks, young adults, your request to somebody, why don't you come to church with me? I remember when Brother Tommy posed the question to us, you know, come to service. That was unthinkable. I wouldn't go to that the Faith and Victory people. I'd heard so many bad things about them. And I really had. all my life. And so I never had even any desire whatsoever to come to service because I'd heard so many things. But you know what? When I began to get around the saints, that all changed because I realized how wrong I had been and how wrong I had been told. So there's a lot of people out there longing for something they don't have. But you know what? Sister Tammy told me that she knew Sister Carol and Harmon, was it? Sorrel. Sister Carol Sorrel. And Harlan, he was 22, right? And he began to reach out to them and work with them. And then her grandmother had a big influence on her. But see, she wasn't raised around the saints. And Randy wasn't really, was he? Maybe a little bit? A little? But you know, the Lord began to work with them. And Sister Tammy got saved. She got saved. She was just a worldly girl. But the Lord changes lives, doesn't he? And so that little friendship that Harlan reached out to them, Brother Harlan Sorrel, reached out to them and helped them be able to come and find something they didn't know about. But she got saved, actually, in the world. You know, the Lord will save somebody anywhere they ask, won't he? And so she prayed with a minister from another denomination. But I want to tell you, when your heart's wanting God, you're going to get God. And so, anyway, she got saved, and the reaching out of those different ones, Brother Harlan was real instrumental in that. He was just 22 years old. Then they began to meet people that they felt the sweetness and the gentleness of what they had, and they wanted that. And you know, the Lord began to work. I'm kind of cutting this really short because I'm feeling under. But, you know, that's the same thing Brother Bill Edwards told me. He said, I had been invited to church because, see, they didn't go to church when he grew up. But when he said, I had been invited to a Baptist church with a friend. And I went. He said, it never did anything for me. But he said, when I came to Four Corners, to that service, the first time he realized there's something different here. And you know, there's something in our hearts that long for those good things. Young folks, I want to encourage you. You're reaching out. There's a whole host. I've got quite a list here, which we don't have time for this morning. But I want to tell you, there's quite a few among us that the Lord has reached out through somebody's generosity. I'm not going to go into the length of it right now, but Brother Donnie Elwell, thank goodness, you know, he's the pastor there in Oregon now. Aren't they glad that they have him and his family? Well, you know, somebody just reached out and begged his mom to let him go to Monarch with them, and that's how it started. Then his cousins began to talk to him, and one of them one time said something about, well, at least I can go to bed at night and sleep with a clear conscience. And you know, that little word stuck him. He said, I never forgot it. Because he said, I was afraid to die. But so the Lord bless our little time here together. I know we're so limited on time. Sister Tammy, if you want to take up that and add some to it. I kind of cut yours off. But aren't we glad that the Lord worked with them, and it was just through just one of the young people? So young folks, let's reach out, and I think you might be surprised what the Lord might do. And then there's all these downstream that comes. Here's Brother Joss and his family and others. So the Lord bless us as we start this retreat.
I was just thinking as Brother Phillip was talking there, I'm thankful that someone reached out to my parents. You know, it's changed my life. And you think of how different it could be had that individual not reached out. Brother Phillip was talking about it downstream. My children's experience would be very different today had someone not wanted to reach out. Turn my mother to the mic. I'd also like to say that the retreat has been a very something very dear to my heart over the years. Many special memories were made at the school assembly, and for me, the retreat was a place where I made some real consecrations to the Lord. Maybe as impactful as even Monarch was to me in my youth. And so when I look out and see all you children, I see a lot of potential. And I see some plans that the Lord has that He would like to see fulfilled in each one of you. And I would just like to encourage you here. We have a lot of activities planned. We have a lot of good times together. But also we have some services too that we would encourage you to keep your hearts open to what the Lord has for you. And it can make a lifelong difference in your life. And I remember being a young man here, and I wanted someday to have a family that the Lord could be, that would serve the Lord, be used of Him. I wanted the happy home that I've seen others have.